All right, I'm starting the live stream to YouTube now. And I've asked if we go ahead and unmute the boardroom.
I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors. Brandy, we call roll, please?
Yes. Supervisor Lewis.
Here.
Supervisor Day.
Here.
Supervisor McDaniel.
Here.
Supervisor Ayers.
Here.
And Chairman Lyons.
Here. At this time, we'll have an invocation, if you care to join us, followed by the pledge. Heavenly Father, we ask that you bless us and all the citizens of Rockbridge County, that you help us to stay safe and healthy. You instill wisdom upon the board members so that they can make decisions best for all the people of the county. We ask these in your name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. While the room will be open to the public, due to the size of the meeting room and social distancing requirements, no more than 10 attendees other than the county staff will be allowed into the room at one time. Per the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Executive Order 63, all persons over the age of 5 that do not have a precluding medical condition are asked to wear a face covering. We will hold citizen comments near the beginning of the meeting, and there is one public hearing at 6 p.m. We'll do our best to take citizens' comments remotely. There are 2 options for citizens to offer comments. To join by phone, you may dial into one of the numbers listed on the county website. Webinar ID and password are there for your convenience. Citizens wishing to simply view the meeting live or after the fact can do so on the Rockbridge County Board of Supervisors YouTube channel, also available on the county website. If you wish to make a citizen comment as a Zoom meeting participant, you will use the raise your hand feature. You can press the raise your hand button on the bottom of the Zoom window, or press *9 if you are calling in by phone. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. Are there any recognitions or presentations this evening? At this time, we'll start our citizens' comments section of the meeting. We'll do the people that are present first. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. There will be a timer set when you start. Please state your name and magisterial district that you're from. Please address all comments to the board. Ms. Bolster? Do we have any?
There was no one signed up on the citizen comment sheet. That's for the public hearings. So if they're interested in citizen comments, it's a separate sheet. So I don't know if folks want to just be called up one at a time.
Let's look at the other sheet and we can ask them if they're.
So I apologize in advance if I misstate your name. Ann Russick from Buffalo. And this sign-up sheet is for the admission tax.
That's okay.
So okay.
I could make my comment.
You can make your comments right now if you'd like. Yes, ma'am. Come to the podium, please.
Good evening. My name is Ann Russick, and I'm from the Buffalo District. I'm actually here to talk about the admissions tax as well as the other taxes that are before the supervisors. That would be the admissions tax, the decal tax, which I guess would be under the personal property tax, and your cigarette tax. It's my understanding that the general fund right now is at 30% and that your base is 20%. So I think that would be good news that we're in a good area as far as that goes. The employment for the accommodations and food industries in this county has declined by 9.7%, according to your website, since the pandemic. And yet the taxes on those businesses currently are at 10%. The Virginia Horse Center, I believe, receives 3%. Maybe they receive more. Could somebody let me know if that's 3% is still what they're getting, or are they getting 4% now?
They're getting 3%.
3%. And so I have a problem with the with this increased admissions tax, even though it's not supposed to start, I believe, until January of 2022 at 3%, and then go incrementally up to as high as 10%. I think that's a bad idea on any level. You don't have that many attractions in the county. And technically, I would also offer that the Virginia Horse Center is an attraction. Although the horse shows, you know, the people come in by themselves, they also run other venues there, which are ticket-based. They have the rodeos, they have the bike rallies and things like that. So I think that's a complete conflict, that one business would actually receive tax dollars from your lodging tax, yet other attractions, you're going to charge them a tax. If one man can hold his head above water, everybody should hold their head above water. And your businesses that are the attractions, like I said, which aren't really that many in the county, I think of the safari park, the zoo, the dinosaur kingdom. I'm sure there's others, and I apologize for not knowing who they are. But I know this, those are hardworking people. And I know that their expenses go well beyond the tax dollars that you're trying to get from them. And I don't know how many of you are businessmen. I used to be a businesswoman. We used to have a restaurant, my husband and I. And it is incredible the amount of money that you spend. When you're a small businessman, basically what you've done is you created a job for yourself. And so I completely do not support this idea of having a tax on these businesses. There's also a mixed message going on here. We're saying all over your website, stay home, it's a pandemic, don't go out. And yet, so the message is to all of us, stay home, be safe, don't circulate, don't go anywhere, actually. And then, so, but at the same time, you're telling these businesses that are struggling to stay afloat, we're going to tax the people that come. And I've actually seen on the website, well, it's basically outsiders that are going to be paying this tax. I hate that comment. I think that's just egregious. We're Virginians, and we're all citizens of the same Commonwealth. And it shouldn't be that we would actually use an argument, well, other people will be paying that tax, not the people that live within this county. That's not the way to govern. And there are a lot of people in this county that go to those attractions and do so. So once again, if you're going to have a mixed message, stay home, but then at the same time charge those businesses. Now that's just not good governing. If we move on to the decals and the personal property tax, once again, what bothers me about that, the decals, I think you can work that out, what you're going to do with that. But I see in the future that there's going to be, when you talk about the loss of revenue, so then we would have to raise the personal property tax to make up for that loss of decal revenue. Once again, these are not solutions right now in this time. They're not solutions in any time. When you campaigned, I have a couple quotes here from some of you. Ms. Ayers campaigned and said, I'm running to try to affect things that I care about, clean water, clean air, and good education. Well, I think our water and air is pretty good right now in Rockbridge County. Our education system right now is in the toilet. I mean, the schools aren't even open. So if you want to focus on that, that would be great. Mr. McDaniels had said, and these aren't accusations, these are just comments that, that you made when you campaigned, and you said you wanted to increase the tax base. I always thought increasing the tax base meant bringing more businesses in that would pay taxes. I never thought raising taxes is increasing the tax base. Am I wrong in that assumption, or are they mutual? Is increasing the tax base basically mean bringing in new businesses and businesses that'll add to your tax coffers? Is that correct? Or is increasing the tax base really does mean increasing taxes? Would somebody care to clarify that? Are they two different things? I always thought they were. Is that a yes? Is that a no?
Mr. Chairman, would you like for me to respond? Since it was my comment, the purpose behind that was bringing in new business to the area.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I think that's what we should stick with. I think it's very challenging that that your supervisors right now during this pandemic, but I think you have to rise to that occasion. And I think you maybe have to have forums with your local businessmen, bring them in here and find out what can we do for you to help you keep your businesses afloat. I'll move right on quickly to the cigarette tax. And here's my question to you about that. I'm not a smoker, and it'd be very easy for me to say, I don't care how much you charge for cigarettes. It's never going to affect me in my life. Never smoked a cigarette in my life. So, but here's the thing. It's true that, unfortunately, it's just a fact that a lot of people that smoke cigarettes probably shouldn't be smoking them because they can't afford them in the first place. But it's also true, it's been statistically true, that people will buy cigarettes before they buy food or anything else. That's how strong the addiction is. So once again, my question to you is, with your cigarette tax, are you primarily trying to deter people who are already smoking to possibly think about quitting, and certainly to keep young people from ever smoking with this tax? Or are you really trying to make money by putting a 30-cent per pack tax? Because
right.
then,
Your time is up. Thank
well,
you.
I'm going to finish. Because then your solution is very simple. If you want to charge 30 cents more because you care about the people who are smoking, then it behooves you to use part of that tax money to do something, to start some kind of programs to deter children from getting into smoking and to help those that are trying to kick the habit, so that part of that tax money would actually go to help those people that are addicted to cigarettes. If you just want to raise money, then your solution's simple. Don't tax the pack of cigarettes by 30 cents. Only make it 20 cents, because then you can make this the cigarette capital of Virginia, because then you want all those outside people to come in here to buy their cigarettes for less money, because they're going to all come here because you're going to be charging 10 cents less.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next citizen that signed up for the admission tax was Scott Geis. So again, if you want to speak for citizen comment.
Good evening, everybody. Scott Geis, Cars Creek. Regardless of what has been said or misunderstood, I want to make it perfectly clear up front. The last thing I'm in favor of is removing the tax exemption for logging equipment. This is not why I'm here or my argument. I'm here to advocate on behalf of any business that would be subject to the attractions tax of 3%, and over the course of 2 years be raised to 10%, as the state gave counties the authority to do. I disagree with the board using taxpayer to consistently provide a backup plan for the shortfalls in the budget as a crutch for the excuse of implementing additional taxes. There are certain changes within the budget in order to ensure every small business can take part in tax exemptions. A discussion needs to be had in order to pinpoint where cuts can be made and taxpayer money better allocated. Due to the limited county amenities, aside from establishments aimed at the 21 and older crowd, most of our hard-earned money is and would further be spent in areas such as Waynesboro, Charlottesville, and Roanoke. Meanwhile, local businesses are struggling to make ends meet. If our local attractions, such as places like the Safari Park or Holes Drive-In, cannot sustain themselves due to having to raise admission rates, with their patrons subsequently not able to attend due to those rate increases, then the money leaves the county and the businesses are forced to shut their doors. Is this what we want? This tax authority should not be implemented, especially in lean times such as these. When it comes to the vehicle tax, you got two different things that I've been told. And of course, supposedly the correct answer on the sticker is to make sure that we know who's going and using our landfill. I can tell you from personal experience, and I'm sure everybody in this room has had the same thing, that the people that we employ there, and I'm not harping on them like they need to lose their job, since we got to be so clear today. But they're not out there inspecting vehicles. The other places that are either being shut down or haven't gotten shut down yet, there's nobody out there making sure that the person is in fact a county resident, when they're dumping their trash. And if our inference, if you will, or our whole point of this is it brings in 500 and some odd $1,000 to the county as far as revenue goes, and we're worried about people from other counties coming in and what have you, I guess my question would be, well, the county is already getting paid from various other locations to bring their trash into our county and put it in our landfill. So we need to relook at this sticker. I mean, it's really not serving anybody, in any way, shape, or form other than taxing folks. And not to take away from, anybody else, but, the cost of that sticker is a tank of gas for people. And like I've said before, a lot of the folks that live in this county, they don't work here. They're driving an hour, sometimes an hour and a half away just to go to work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the list is, I believe it's Morgan McCann. I apologize.
Good evening, Morgan Condry McCown from the Curtis Creek District. Some 25 years ago, my family moved to Virginia from Houston, Texas. And one of the first things that we noticed was the fact that the cost of living was astronomical. Our taxes are through the roof and ever growing, and those that are native here are constantly being placed second to those who relocate here from northern states, claiming that the cost of living is so much cheaper. It's nearly impossible for the people of this county to find affordable housing without government assistance. There's absolutely nothing for the youth to do, and we are forced to do moronic things such as buying decals for each of our vehicles every single year, which, by the way, cost as much as roughly 5 gallons of milk. To those of you who have never had to pinch a penny, this is not a big deal. But for those who live in a home in which the total income is around $55,000, like many of the homes here, it matters. The average salary in this county pales in comparison to the cost of living, and yet again, we find ourselves being faced with more taxes for our small businesses and on the purchase of cigarettes. When will it end? The backbone of this community is comprised of small business owners, farmers, loggers, welders, teachers, and first responders. I assure you, it is not the Washington and Lee professors, nor is it the attorneys that keep this community going each and every day. It's time that you remembered us and made decisions to benefit all members of the county instead of decisions that cripple us. Remember who elected you the next time you vote on a budget or a tax increase, because I can assure you, we will. The day will come when you are up for re-election, and we, the community, are sick of it. We want to be remembered. We matter. Even the ones that make $29,000 a year, working in buildings just like this. A county sticker is 5 gallons of milk. That matters to a struggling parent. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, next on the list is Lauren Summers from South River.
Good evening. I'm here to talk again about the admissions tax. I was here several times in the summer when we went through the first round of this, and I am representing Hulls Drive-In as the executive director there. Knew that the admissions tax was going to be an inevitability at some point, but I want to just again reiterate the fact that Hulls Drive-In is a nonprofit organization that is community owned and community supported. So our Rockbridge community already has to kind of foot the bill to keep the business going. And the majority of our business are Rockbridge County residents. About 60% of our guests, customers are Rockbridge County residents. So they are already paying. Adding a tax to them may limit the number of visits that they can make in a season and the amount of membership and other kind of support that they can offer to provide to undergird the business to keep Hulls afloat going into the future. One of our mission statements is to keep it family friendly and affordable for Rockbridge County residents. Of course, we welcome the visitors and the guests, which we have many of that come from outside of the area to visit us, but they're the one time a season.
maybe twice a season visitors, whereas it's our local residents that are supporting us and keeping us afloat. One other thing I would like you to consider when making the decision about this is that by the time we get to a 10% admissions tax, understand that the business model for Hull's Drive-In is based on a percentage that we have to pay in order to be able to show a movie. We pay up to 70% of our admission dollars on any given night to the studio for the privilege of being able to show that movie to our guests. By the time we add another 10% admissions tax, we're up to 80% of the money that we're bringing in at the gate being gone. That is not really a sustainable business model. And I think most people would say that Hull's, with its 72-year history in the county, we would really like to see that sustain indefinitely into the future. So my request would be that, being a county supported, county resident supported, we do not get any county dollars other than through the residents, nonprofit organization, that we be considered to be exempted from this admissions tax. Thank you.
Thank you.
Somebody else signed up.
Okay, is there anyone electronically?
There are no attendees with a hand raised or any questions at this point.
Do we have anyone out in the hall that couldn't get in?
Just one individual.
Good evening.
I'm new to the area and I'm retired military.
Could you please state your name and magisterial district?
John Myers, Lexington. I moved here for the simple reason, like a lot of people moved up here, for the beauty of the area. I came from Roanoke, and the very same thing I'm seeing here is going on in Roanoke. What I don't understand is, during the pandemic, why is there a tax on people, obviously even businesses, that can't deal with it? Tell me why there is a tax in a pandemic. Can anybody tell me that? Has anybody here got a pay raise? Anybody? Has anybody got a pay raise? And it's a pandemic, and yet you're taxing people. Where's this coming from? Can somebody tell me that? Nobody? Really, I want to know. I'm a citizen. I'm paying taxes in this city now. Anybody?
Sir, this is your chance to address the board. It's not a dialogue.
I understand that.
Okay, so
But I see the same thing happening all over the country. People cannot afford any more taxes. I'm on a strict budget. You don't think the military doesn't give you a good pension? I can't work because I'm disabled, but yet there's going to be a tax, and eventually the tax is going to sift down to the citizens, businesses to the citizens, and whatever. You talk about attraction tax. I just need some answers, folks. I'm new here. I like this place, and I don't understand why we're being taxed. That's it.
Mr. Chair, we have one other individual that would like to speak during citizen comments.
Excuse me. Hello.
Hello,
Uh,
are you here for public comment or
well,
the,
yeah, no, yeah, I was gonna wait till you,
okay,
the other thing. He just, all right.
all right. Okay, at this time, we'll close citizens' comments. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the January 25th meeting? Can I have a motion to approve?
Remove.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. The county financial packet, Mr. Bolster?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, good evening. If you go to your board docs package, you'll see there's a memorandum. It's got some activities from the Commissioner of the Revenue. I'll go ahead and read through those. He has submitted his compensation and county budgets for FY22. He and his staff continue to work the business license renewals and business personal property taxes. Those are due on March 1st. You'll also see on item 6 that they continue to do audits of local tax accounts, and those are linked to the B-poll taxes that are due again on March 1st. He and his team are also processing the tax relief for elderly and disabled applications, and those are due no later than April 1st. And they are starting to see an increase in state income business taxes being paid at the counter, and those are due on May 1st. And again, he's does his monthly reconciliation with the DMV report that comes to his office. If there's no questions, I'll go ahead and transition to the treasurer's activities for the month. The first item is that there are 17 individuals that have been submitted to the state for debt set-off collection. Should that come through, that would be $4,454 that comes back to the county. Ms. Travato has also submitted her county and compensation board budgets for FY22. For those that have dogs, dog tags were due on January 31st, and she's doing a reconciliation of her files to see who is unpaid as of January 31st. And linked to the business professional occupational licenses that are due in March, she is seeing activities. People are coming in and paying those taxes. And then she's got a list related to the number of citizens or transactions that are occurring on the .net platform, which is allowing folks to pay with their credit and debit cards. So if I'll just kind of rattle through these. If you do a comparison with 16 to 17, you'll see that the number of transactions is up about 44%. From 17 to 18, it's up approximately 21%. From 18 to 19, it's up 16%. And then from 19 to 20, you can see that's up 27%. How much of that for calendar year 2020 is linked to the pandemic? Can't say, but it is an increase from 2019. If there's no questions for Ms. Travato, I'll go ahead and transition to my informational update. You can see there's a section on the Central and Fairfield Elementary financing. And so the last time we briefed at the joint board meetings back on the 21st of last month, there was a discussion that we would be doing a dual track of both a Virginia Public School Authority and a direct bank financing effort. As we kind of dug deeper into the project, one of them in particular, Fairfield Elementary School, is going to be beyond just replacing the units up on the rooftop. So when we were considering a direct bank financing, we were going to use the new HVAC units as part of the security or the collateral for the lease purchase financing. But because that particular project's going to involve a little bit more deeper dive into the building to correct some HVAC issues, it's been determined that it's going to be a little bit more complicated than doing just a simple lease purchase financing. It would actually involve what's called a leaseback financing that would likely involve doing the financing through the Economic Development Authority. Some of the challenges we have is cost and time. both for staff and for bond counsel to dig a little bit deeper to see if any of those two buildings or any of the school buildings already have liens on them from other financings. And it's just basically come down to just time and potential cost for bond counsel. That as we looked at borrowing about $4.2 million to complete those two projects, the difference between the VPSA financing and a direct financing or a lease-back financing would be fairly small. And so a decision has been made to go ahead and move forward with a VPSA application that's due on the 22nd of this month. So if you've had a chance to look out, you may not have, at the school board meeting for tomorrow night, they have an agenda item where they will consider a resolution to request the board to issue a general obligation school bond through the VPSA. Presuming that goes forward tomorrow night, staff will be coming forward to the Board of Supervisors with a reimbursement resolution for the board to consider. That will, if approved, allow the board or the county to look back 60 days for expenditures that may have occurred prior to the financing to allow us to be reimbursed for those efforts. If there's any questions on that, I am available to answer. If not, just a kind of an
Mr.
update on.
Bolster, I'm sorry, you said that there was a small difference between the BPSA and the straight lease. And what was the difference?
It's an estimated, there's not a number. When we talked to our financial advisor, based on the amount that's being borrowed and the terms that we're looking at, their presumption is that it would be fairly close between the lease-back financing and the VPSA. And so in light of the fact that there would be time and a cost for both staff and bond counsel to do some deeper digging into our previous financings, it was determined that it would be more efficient to go ahead and just simply do a VPSA application and finance it through that organization, through that authority.
And what's the term that we're looking at on it?
It was a lease-back financing, and it would involve, it was proposed to involve the Economic Development Authority. It's a little bit complicated, but it would involve us basically leasing, the school division leasing some of their buildings to the EDA, the EDA leasing back those buildings back to the school division at the amount of the financing. And then simply that lease would be the same amount as the overall financing. And
He's looking for a term in years. I think he was looking for a term in years. Is that correct?
the term, it'd be the life cycle of the HVAC system. So we're talking about 20 years. All right. If there's no other questions, just going back to the budget schedule. So the Finance Committee is scheduled to meet over the next 3 weeks and take a look at the anticipated revenues and requested budget expenditures for FY22. And the presentation to the board is scheduled for February 25th at 5:30. With that, if you take a look at your line chart, so just a very similar theme has been occurring since we have the CARES Act funding to support public safety expenditures in the general fund. You'll see that our revenues are in excess of our expenditures, and that's primarily due to the fact that we have transferred almost $2.4 million from the CARES Act funding that we received to support public safety expenditures in the general fund. Which you'll see on the line chart should continue to track as we move forward through the fiscal year. Are there any questions on the line chart at this time? If not, if you go to the appropriation resolution, you'll see there's one item. It's a request for $3,472 for the purchase of police equipment. The Sheriff's Office has received this funding from the Department of Justice. It's to purchase bulletproof vests. That funding was received in January, just this past month. With that, there's 433 invoices or bills to be paid on the bills list. I've taken some notes on the bills list, so if there's any questions on any particular item, I will do my best to answer it. If there's no questions, staff's recommendation is to approve the appropriation resolution as presented.
Are there any questions for Mr. Bolster? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the appropriation resolution?
So moved.
Have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second. Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you, Mr. Bolster.
Thank you.
It is 6:03, so we will move and start the public hearing to amend the Rockbridge County Code, Chapter 25 taxation to add a new Article 14 admissions tax. Mr. Suter?
Yes, as directed, staff did advertise the ordinance. It would be, as everyone has discussed, a 3%, 3%, and 4% raise over 3 years. And we capped at $3. It includes exemptions for admissions charge to attendance at all public and private elementary, secondary, and college school-sponsored events, including events sponsored by school recognized student organizations. It would be admissions charge, and also exempt would be admissions charge to participants in order to participate in sporting events. The tax is collected by the operator of the event or business from the customer and is held in trust until paid to the county. Returns are then filed with the Commission of the Revenue. Determinations as to whether the tax applies to a specific event, series of events, or business is within the purview of the Commission of the Revenue. However, generally speaking, the tax would not be imposed on the purchase of a meal or product, but would be imposed on any admission charge for entry into an event, occasion, or business. A non-exclusive list of examples is included in section 25-4 or 242 of the ordinance. And again, anyone would have questions on that for an application of predetermination may be filed with the Commissioner of the Revenue, David Weitzel, who's with us tonight. As far as the fiscal impact, we put some information in your report as to potential fiscal impacts, but without history, it'll be somewhat difficult to present totals in the first year. So I did take a look the best I could. In 26 days in August, generated about $60,000 when it was imposed at 10%. And so at 3%, we would have generated about 20,000 if the additional 4 days was included in a month. And if we assume that a peak season of approximately 6 months, in generally it's about 6 months of standard admissions events that's in the better months of the year usually, it would likely generate around $120,000 in those 6 months if you use those assumptions. So if you add that to the unknown of the off season and what events might occur, then I would conservatively estimate around 140 or 150,000 at 3% for 1 year. It's just the only way we could really arrive at it. So happy to answer any questions that you might have prior to or after the public hearing. And as I said, Mr. Weitzel is in attendance.
Any questions for Mr. Suter? All right, we'll now open the public hearing. I know Mr. Klein is here.
Mr. Chair, did you want me to start over on this list or to see if they want to do public hearing?
I think they gave their comment.
All right.
Copy that.
Mr. Klein, welcome.
Well, hello. Don't have any candy bars for y'all tonight. But I wrote some things down because I just can't remember stuff. Comes with being 60 years old, I guess. So, and we've had some discussions, and so that's all been good. I'm glad we were able to communicate in the past on a few things. And I just got a few more notes to add to that concerning the admissions tax. And I'm gonna have to bring this a little closer. I know that during our discussions in the past, Jay's always seemed to allude that when we've asked him about where he thought where we thought the tax money should go, he would always say, well, we need more monies. And as expenses grow, and that's pretty much the only answer we got, nothing real specific.
That's not what I said, sir.
Well, what did you say?
I said that the Commonwealth has given us less funds, so we need to replace that. And the Commonwealth has also said, this is where you should go to get money.
Okay,
Not
well,
more money.
all right, well, you know what? I'll stand corrected. All right, and so I appreciate it. But at any rate, we're still not 100% sure where all that money would go. Nothing real specific at that. Maybe that's what I meant. So, but here's a factor that I just wanted to bring up that I want to make you aware of, that we didn't really even consider last year. I don't think we chatted about the election, but we didn't really think too much about it because it was all crazy going on. And since Biden's been in office, there's been we've seen a big increase in the gas prices, and directly because of his new policies. We didn't factor that in. It's not unreasonable to see gas go up to maybe even hit $4 again this summer, which is going to really affect businesses like mine and the other tourist businesses. The difference is we do have we have a model now, because I remember we went through the same thing in 2008. And I will tell you that when we were running the Monster Museum down there, that really put a damper on us. So it's just something else to consider. All right, which I never thought was brought up during one of our other conversations. Let's see. I have a suggestion about your proposal, and that is that maybe we do get through 2021, and then if we come to an agreement, we should do it by making decisions based on a year-by-year observation, and not just say 3% this year, 3% next year, 10%. Maybe we should just, is that my bill? That's not my bill, is it?
It is, but finish up.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I'd also suggest that whatever the case may be, really, you should look at the nonprofits as them being on razor thin budgets, and that and the balance of how they drive people in the community to come here and spend their money in the restaurants, in the hotels. We should consider exempting them, whatever we decide. Ultimately, I think we need to collect more data on this and research, and maybe at some point, as we had mentioned before, the Board of Supervisors, the Board of Tourism, and some of the attractions all get together in the same room and talk about this. And I think we were heading toward that direction in one of our last meetings. And so I'm going to leave it at that. Thank y'all for having me.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that hasn't spoken and wishes to address concerning the admissions tax? All right, at this time, we'll close the public hearing.
We need to check the.
I'm sorry, anybody electronically?
Yeah, we have Charles Barger has raised their hand.
Okay.
Would you, Mr. Lyons, would you like me to promote them to panelists so you can see them on a video?
Yes, we would.
All right, Mr. Barger will be promoted to panelist. If you could please unmute your microphone and turn on your video if you have it.
Hello, my name is Chuck Barger. I'm here representing Lime Kiln Theater. And I would like to chime in with Mark and say, yes, we would like to see nonprofits such as ourselves exempt. And the reason being, last year we had no season, we had no income. And so we, just for one example, are going to have fundraisers. And we have ticket sales for those fundraisers. So those ticket sales theoretically would be taxed. So would those of, let's just use, for example, no particular order, Boxerwood, the Christmas Basket Program, the community table of Rockbridge, Evanger Fire Department, Cars Creek Fire Department, Lexington Police Foundation, Rockbridge NAACP, Project Horizon, Habitat for Humanity, Rockbridge Area Health Center, Hospice. All of the organizations are nonprofits. They would all be subject to, theoretically, a tax. I feel like it would be best if we could just go ahead and exempt these fine organizations, and there are many, many more that I haven't mentioned. And after a year's time, as Mark suggested, go ahead and reevaluate. Take a break. Take a look at what's going on. How much money have you raised? Because you really don't know at this point how much you will be able to raise. Take a look at it, reevaluate it, go over this again, and have a similar type meeting this time next year, just to see if it's working the way you wanted it to, and if there are other ways that are more equitable and fair to raise funding for the county. The county needs money. We know that. They've been hit by the pandemic as well, but who could be harder hit by this than your nonprofits? So please do keep this in consideration, and I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other electronics?
I'm not seeing any other hands raised or any questions.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll close the public hearing and open it up for board comment.
Just a question. Last meeting, I asked the question whether or not why we had considered doing 3 years, 3%, 3%, 4%. And the answer I got led me to believe that you were just giving a timeline and expectation so that the community would know this is what we're thinking. I believe it wasn't my expectation that it would be automatic, that there would not be a public meeting the following year to decide if, yes, in fact, we should go another year with an additional 3%. And it does seem that that's the way it's written. Is that true? So there would be no public comment unless we decided to open that up. There's no automatic public comment to raise the taxes, the admissions tax, the second year for an additional 3%.
Mr. Chairman, may I answer?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Ayers, that is correct. It is currently in the ordinance that for those periods of time, those are the percentages for the admissions tax to be imposed. The board could raise it and hold a public hearing to amend that at any time.
You mean we could have a public meeting to do the 7% instead of 3%? We would need a public hearing for that. We wouldn't need a public hearing necessarily to not have the tax the second year.
Change anything from what is in the ordinance that ends up being adopted, you would have to have another public hearing.
Correct.
Am I answering your question?
I'm sorry? I believe you have. I mean, it seems uncommon that we would impose a tax over 3 years this way. Is this a common practice that we would do it this way?
It is not the norm. However, I believe some of the comments from last summer were that that it took about a year of lead time for businesses to prepare. I remember the Hull's drive-in manager, Pt.1 in particular, of needing at least a year's lead time in order to set their ticket prices to prepare for the upcoming season. And so I believe that was the reason for establishing these percentages out over a period of time so everyone would know what to expect in the proposed ordinance.
Any other comments?
Well, that, just from the committee that worked on it, that was the purpose behind it, for some planning for not only the board, but the community as well. And the problem that you run into having a public hearing at this point next year is you would only have about 1 month of data to look at. If you really want to look at the first year of data, that needs to be looked at probably in October or November, and then you've only got a month or two before a proposed change coming up. So
correct. So if we had 3% for 1 year and perhaps waited a second year to see whether in fact how successful or how damaging this tax could be to our businesses and nonprofits might actually be a good thing. Have you considered that? Is that something that we can consider as a board? I think that Mr. Barger's comments are good comments. They're good things for us to consider, that perhaps we were going to see how, this is why we were staging this in 3 parts. It wasn't only to prepare, it's we weren't sure the impact of these taxes on our businesses and nonprofits. And so if in fact we don't have the data we need and we're automatically going to raise it to 6%, I have some real concerns. I also have some real concerns about how we raise money to fulfill our obligations. I also have problems, again, with our nonprofits. Some of these nonprofits are the very reason people come into our community to spend money. And I just struggle when our nonprofits are spending so much time and energy. It's not just fundraisers. It's almost all of their operation is literally driven by volunteers. And I would like to see a study of how much those businesses and nonprofits cost us in terms of services. If in fact they don't, I just don't understand why we would put a 10% tax. I certainly not a 10% tax. I was on board with doing the 3%, seeing where we were, but an automatic 3% next year without knowing the ramifications of this tax, I think is a problem for us. I do. And I would really like to see us step back a year from it before we impose the next 3%. That's it for me, comments wise.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, I understand what Ms. Ayers is saying, and, listening to some comments made here tonight, perhaps, and I'm not speaking for Mr. Lewis, I'm just speaking for myself, who worked on this proposal. Perhaps, we should have a work session next meeting to discuss this in more detail if changes need to be made to the proposal.
Ms. Huffman, am I understanding this correctly? The tax wouldn't be imposed until January of 2022, and that would be at a rate of 3%.
That's correct.
Is there anything that would prohibit the board if during the 2022 year that they found that this was going to be a terrific burden, that they could not bring it back up.
Board could bring it up at any
And
time.
so,
You would just be like a 30-day lead time to be able to publish.
so in November or December, everyone has a year to prepare almost. And then if by November or December of 2022, we're getting feedback from our nonprofits or from our businesses that this is not going well, or it's creating a burden, or hey, we can live with this, but we can't live with doubling it, we could have a session and delay the increases, if that was the desire of the board.
Yes, yes, you could eliminate or delay
Right.
or change or.
So I think what Ms. Ayers is asking, what this is, the increases in here, I don't think are in stone. They can be changed if it's the will of the board. And I think we've started some good relationship with our businesses and some good dialogue. And I think delaying, or already put it off to January of 2022. So for most of them, there'll be no effect this year. For our nonprofits, it gives us a chance to see how well they're recovering. We know it'll be 3% in 2022. Beyond 2022, I would say we'd have to count on our continued relationship with the businesses and look for that data and feedback. And if we see it's not going the way we want it to, then there's nothing that prohibits the board from bringing it back up and either eliminating it, preventing the increase, or if it's going really well and everybody's happy and say, hey, this is great, why don't you increase it? So I think it doesn't close the door on any of our options, but it allows us to give people a year to prepare, then a year at 3%, so that we can evaluate the decisions we made. Are there any other comments? All right, no other comments. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Day?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. We'll now move on to our annual report of the Natural Bridge Speedway. Mr. Slayden.
Yes, sir. Members of the board, thank you. Per condition number 1 of the special exception permit, the Natural Bridge Speedway is required to present an annual report to the Board of Supervisors. The report is supposed to be presented to the Board of Supervisors before the second meeting in January. The owners of the Speedway were submitted that report for the second meeting in January, but there were corrections and revisions required before submitting it to the Board of Supervisors for your review. Along with the 2020 annual report, staff has also included in your package the February 27th, 2012 special exception ordinance and associated conditions. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mr. G.W. Fitzgerald to review the annual report and answer any questions the board may have. Mr. Fitzgerald?
All right. Hello, I'm George Fitzgerald on the Natural Bridge Speedway. like I said, had a pretty rough year of 11 weeks. It's all we got to run because of the pandemic, but otherwise we survived. I tried to do what we was required to do. Might have had a few little problems here and there, but due to the circumstances, I thought we did okay. I ain't got any questions. I'm trying to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Fitzgerald?
No, sir, other than, we of course want to support you again for all the reasons that we bring people here to the community to support the events. We have requirements that we have to go by for everybody's safety and the pleasure of those guests. So, we appreciate your efforts along those lines and look forward to those continuing.
Yeah, me too. I hope this year, like I said, talking about the gas prices now, I'm a little worried already, but we'll see how it goes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you.
Consideration of the general reassessment RFP, Mr. Bolster.
Yes, good evening again. It's been 6 years since the last reassessment was completed. As you all know, the county is on a 6-year cycle for the general reassessment. Staff has looked back at the previous request for proposal and made some modifications and updated it for this cycle. As you can see in your agenda report, there are 7 criteria that are listed in the RFP. There is a potential for interviews with future firms that do submissions. The reason we've come tonight is that we have a request for the board to consider this be done as an RFP versus an invitation for bid. And so staff believes this particular effort falls under what's called the non-professional service category. In compliance with Virginia Code Section 2.2-4303-C, it states that goods, services other than professional services, and insurance may be procured by competitive sealed bidding or competitive negotiations. Upon a determination made in advance by the local governing body in the case of a procurement by a political subdivision of the Commonwealth, that competitive negotiation is either not practicable nor fiscally advantageous. The basis for this determination shall be documented in writing. And so it is staff's position that we deem that we could get the best service for the county at the best price, following the scope of the services, if this was done as a request for proposal versus an invitation for bid. There is a possibility that by doing it as a request for proposal, that we could get the most technically qualified firm to complete the general reassessment rather than the lowest bidder. In addition, an experienced proposer may offer recommendations which may prove both beneficial and cost effective to the county. So again, our request to staff is that the board authorize issuance of a request for proposals for the services outlined in the scope of services for our 6-year general reassessment, finding that an invitation for bids is neither practicable nor fiscally advantageous to the public for the reasons mentioned previously.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Bolster?
Mr. Bolster, tangential question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the General Assembly requires us to perform this service, correct?
That's correct.
The reevaluation, the reassessment.
Yes, sir.
Do they send us any money to pay for that?
No, sir.
Thank you, sir. How much does it cost? One more question. Roughly $500,000?
Yes, I think it was about.
It's probably going to be a little bit more this time.
Oh,
probably
things went up?
Yes. I don't know. I hope not.
Any other questions? You've heard the request. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
A motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second. Mr. Lewis.
Aye.
Mr. Day.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yeah.
Ms. Ayers.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. We've also been asked to select a member from the board to serve on the evaluation committee. Unless someone is dying to do it, I'm willing to sit on that committee. I've been part of several RFP committees. So if there's no objections, otherwise, I'd be willing to step aside if someone else would prefer to be part.
I guess it's you, Dan.
All right. Lewis and Clark Trail update, Mr. Suter.
Yes, in 2014, the board adopted a resolution supporting the eastward extension of the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail through Rockbridge. Over time, the board has received periodic updates on this. In 2016, the board adopted a follow-on resolution to expand heritage and tourism development in the Commonwealth. Both resolutions were included in your package for background, and also included 2 maps from the original resolutions and presentations. One is the larger map, and the other one is the approximate route of Lewis and Clark expedition through the county. And last year, we were fortunate enough to have county resident Dr. Dawn Weiss agree to represent Rockbridge on the Virginia Lewis and Clark Legacy Trail Board of Directors. She contacted me and asked to give a brief update to the Board of Supervisors, and is participating, I hope, via Zoom. And so, Stefan, if you could promote Dr. Weiss to the panelist position.
Don has been promoted.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. So thank you for the chance first to talk with you tonight, but also for being able to serve in this capacity. I live in the Buffalo district and have lived in this area since almost 20 years. But this has been a real pleasure to join this effort. And I just wanted to give you a very brief overview so you know what's going on now, and to take any information back that you would like me to take back to the overall board. The effort started this past, I guess, earlier in the year with four counties participating. It has now recruited a board of 13 members, and Rockbridge being one of those locations. One of the things that's important to know about Rockbridge in this effort is, from what we can tell at this point, Rockbridge has more documented sites related to Lewis and Clark in the state of Virginia than any of the other counties participating. As such, the potential economic impact for our area is pretty significant. There was a 2017 study in Nebraska about economic impact, and I just wanted to share that with you so you have an idea of what we might be talking about should the trail come to fruition in Virginia. So this was 2017, looking from January to September, with let's see, there are 8 visitor centers in the state of Nebraska, with the economic impact ranging from 355,000 to 20,132,000. So that's in about a 9-month period in 2017. So a pretty significant impact, particularly considering we have more potential sites than any other county, and our location is pretty phenomenal. So just to give you an update, and this in terms of our actual sites, and I believe you've got some of this information. One area is known as the Red House, and these are remains, but it's north of town, off Route 11, sort of in the Fairfield area, where the McDowell family cemetery is. And so there are remains of a home in that area. I'm still working to try to figure out exactly who owns that property so that we can get permission to have that as a part of the trail. The second is historically known as McConkey's Tavern, which is the Natural Bridge area. Prior to this fall, we thought we had verified it as a site, but now it has been definitively noted as a site, and we're working on the paperwork. I have contacted those property owners, and they were excited to know that it would qualify as a site and are happy to participate. The last location that we know as documented, and this one you all likely know, is right in downtown Lexington, Styles Tavern. And I'm working still to contact that property owner to make sure that he is comfortable having that as a recognized site. As part of this effort, There is also what's called a visitor access committee, and each of the property owners in our area will have an opportunity to participate on the visitor access committee. The reason for that is to make sure that that property owners, should these be private residences, for example, that property owners are completely comfortable with how their particular properties are included on the trail. We still have a long way to go, but things are going really well, and it's a great committee, and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them, or at least to get you answers, or to take any recommendations back to the full board.
Are there any questions?
No, thank you for working on it, Dr. Weaver.
And my pleasure. I really do appreciate the opportunity.
All right, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, before you move on to the next item, I do have a suggestion, since we're getting on up close to the
might
time
like
to
you.
7 o'clock.
That we move ahead and
That if you look at the item 12, yes.
the consideration to set public hearing for ordinance to approve relocation of polling places for Collierstown and South Buffalo precincts. Ms. Huffman?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the Rockbridge County Electoral Board has submitted information to the county administrator on plans to relocate 2 of the polling places that have been located at the Effinger Fire Department. The Collierstown precinct in the Carrs Creek Magisterial District is requested to be moved to the school board office of the Rockbridge County Public Schools at 2893 Collierstown Road. A letter dated January 20th, 2021 from Dr. Thompson, superintendent, confirming availability is attached in your agenda. The second proposed change is to relocate the polling place for the Effinger precinct in the Buffalo Magisterial District from the Effinger Fire Department to the Palmer Community Center at 1230 Bluegrass Trail. A copy of a confirmation communication dated January 25th, 2021 from Martha Rocket, Secretary, on behalf of the Palmer Board of Directors to Harry Stone, Chairman of the Rockbridge County Electoral Board, is attached in your packet. This action requires adoption of an ordinance to amend the county code following a public hearing. The proposed ordinance has been included on your agenda, and so if acceptable to the board, this action requested is to schedule a public hearing on the proposed ordinance for the February 22nd, 2021 meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Huffman. Any questions for Ms. Huffman? I have a motion to schedule the public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second. Mr. Day?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Ms. Ayers?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, in looking at efficiency too, I think item 11 I could get to pretty quickly.
Okay.
So this is on the cigarette tax. This is kind of an update. The board's discussed implementation of the cigarette tax twice over the past several months, the last time being in early January. The board subsequently directed staff to return to the board on February 8th, the night, with an ordinance for consideration for implementation. Since that time, we've learned that legislation, Senate Bill 1326, has been introduced in the General Assembly, and that would require any localities implementing a cigarette tax to form a regional cigarette tax board of no fewer than 10 localities. A copy is in your package. On February 3rd, Senate Bill 1326 was reported out of the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee with amendments. The proposed amendment provides for localities which have already adopted by January 31st to have a grace period until 2026 to join a regional body. And as this board has not yet acted on anything or enacted any tax, this would not apply to us. The bill has passed the Senate and is now in the House. The potential for this bill to be signed into law somewhat changes the discussion that the board was originally having prior to this. Prior to this, the board had opted to go it alone and not join a regional body and not have the state manage that. So as such, there wasn't really any point in bringing you a resolution or an ordinance tonight. So we are continuing to monitor the bill and we'll certainly update the board as new information becomes available. And Ms. Huffman's, my recommendation at this point is to hold up a bit to determine if there's going to be any other changes in legislation. So not doing something for consideration twice. And obviously, this would require an ordinance that we would need to bring to you and then to be duly advertised for public hearing.
Any questions for Mr. Suter?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I have one minor update. The included in the report, we learned last Wednesday that there had been an amendment from the Senate Finance and Appropriations that was reported to the Senate. The Senate has declined to adopt with that amendment. So the original bill essentially is what the Senate has approved unanimously.
Sorry, the date would be December 31 instead of January 31. Correct. Of last year.
For what?
The one of the amendments was to extend the date. So it went back to the original.
Well, I'm not following, sorry.
All right, so that's the problem with the fast moving bill. The original bill was that that any locality or county that had enacted the tax, I believe by the end of last year.
January 1, 2020.
January 1. And then the amendment that did not pass was to move that to January 31, I believe.
Of 2021.
Yeah.
Any other questions? If you all just keep an eye on it and give us updates as they become available. Now, I think we have time for the continued county decal discussion, Mr. Stewart.
Okay. At a January 25th work session, the board discussed several options concerning the annual county decals. And following a staff presentation, the board discussed several concerns or questions, which included impacts of the workload on either commissioner of revenue or treasurer, and then also method of replacing revenue, which again is currently budgeted at $535,000, or by decreasing expenditures. Purchase of decals, so just to answer a couple of those, purchase of decals and postage for the program is approximately $15,000 to send out notices and also to purchase decals. And the other point of discussion was the personnel costs for administering the decal program. And at the time, I don't know if I did it well, but I explained that the current decal program is cyclic, and that staff of the treasurer's office could utilize the time previously spent on processing decals to focus on tax collections. And then the other thing that was introduced at that meeting, Mr. Travato noted that an additional option for the board to consider to replace revenue would involve or could involve an increase in the personal property tax such that the highest valued vehicles in the county would only increase by the current decal amount. So the highest increase, if you calculated, and Mr. Travato's here, so if I screw this up, please let me know, that you would look at the highest taxed vehicle in the county and you would figure out what it would take to replace in the personal property tax rate, so that that vehicle would only be taxed at a maximum of right at $25. So it would not change anything on the upper end. And then that percentage increase would be applied to all personal property tax. So any other, trailers, boats, whatever is taxed, that percentage would apply. So that the increase would be spread over all personal property. Am I making that clear? Okay.
But no one would actually pay an increase because no one would be more than $25.
Exactly.
They're
That
currently
would be
paying for
the,
their decal.
that is, I believe, what Mr. Votto was getting at.
So it would be
And
cost neutral or savings.
I believe Mr. Weitzel's in the back shaking his head no. You're gonna, you need to, that nobody can hear you online, dude. I think what you were getting at is correct, but he's got more to add.
Be cost neutral on vehicles that require the decal and would have a decal. But it would not be, if it's spread across the board on all personal property, neutral on trailers that didn't require a decal or boats that didn't require a decal or business personal property. Because it's taxed at the same rate as your vehicle is. So that's what she's looking up. And I'm not disagreeing, but that's what she's looking at to make up the difference. Is that is applied to personal property that doesn't have to buy the decals. But as far as vehicles, yeah, it's going to be neutral.
Okay. I understand. Thank you.
And then she also suggested that, you know, wherever that fell short could be made up from another way. As you know, as noted, we brought this back for additional discussion to determine whether or not the board wishes to continue pursuit of the proposal, and if so, whether the board would prefer to see a permanent decal or a window sticker up behind the rear view mirror.
Board comment? Questions?
So somehow we've got to sit down and figure out who's got the expensive vehicle that we're going to tax, but we're going to limit it to $25. So aren't we creating some work and confusion there? Plus, then she said something about that, or somebody said we'll make it up another way. What's the other way? You know, we have something that's working. I don't see any point in muddying the waters or changing things.
Yeah, and again, I respectfully disagree because it's not working. It's an onerous process for the citizens. It's an onerous process for the treasurer. So and that's why it's been brought forward for 10 years is, you know, people have complained about having to do it.
If it's not working, but we're bringing in $500,000,
The
and that's not
process,
working?
the process for the citizens is what I was saying isn't working. So that's why it was brought forward. So the question is how can we move forward progressively, like seemingly when I researched this, the overwhelming majority of other jurisdictions have done. I think many of them forgave the revenue, which I don't think we can do based on, you know, even the latest example of the reassessment needs for funds for that. So I'm not, I wouldn't advocate to try to get rid of those. I think we do always look judiciously at what we're spending tax money on. So I don't think this is necessarily a discussion of where we're spending stuff, but I don't think we can give up the revenue. But the process of obtaining the decals, applying them, worrying about all that is what was driving the conversation. The evidence of many other jurisdictions not going through this process for those reasons seems to me to be a positive step. The details here are we're getting in the weeds on some of this stuff, I think, but I mean, we have to, I guess, be judicious, but I don't see the decals as a necessary process to have to go through.
Any other comments?
Is it, and I realize we're under a time constraint with where we're at right now to how we process this into the budget for the upcoming year. Is it not something that we can do away with the decals and look at the revenue that is lost for this particular year to come out of reserves and figure out, that gives us time to figure out for next year's budget cycle how to impact that and impact the loss of revenue?
I can respond to that. One of the reasons that it's that there's a schedule crunch is because Mr. Votto has to order decals, whether they're annual decals or permanent decal. And despite what some people think, decals, it's about the only way we have for people at collection centers, and our folks are looking. They're limited by COVID and how much contact they can have directly with people. But our folks at the collection centers and at the landfill, they do utilize those decals to be able to quickly and efficiently identify county residents. And so do sheriff's deputies when people are illegally coming from another locality, dumping in our collection centers and also our currently the unstaffed centers. So that's where the thing is. The revenue would need to be replaced in some way this year, and that the idea would be that would be replaced from reserves this year. But then the revenue next year is what the concern is.
Thank you, Mr. Suter. I don't understand a conversation that says that we can let reserves take care of the $535,000 of lost revenue this year when we have just asked our business and our nonprofits to step up and pay. Well, give it in a year. We have just passed a new tax. If we don't need that 500, then we didn't need to pass that tax. There's just, in my mind, until we can figure out a way to make sure a citizen is a county citizen when they go in and throw their trash away or visit our recycling, we have to have that, a decal. I haven't been convinced yet of how to address the lost revenue yet. So I don't, in my mind, I'm not even close to being able to say, yes, let's go ahead and get rid of this because we can make it up here. And I don't think we're close to a solution. So to answer your question, no, I would like not to get rid of that tax this year in hopes that we can find a savings someplace else.
Any other comments?
So I guess the question to the board is, staff needs to know whether to bring back an ordinance, and if so, what to put in.
Or do you need an ordinance at all?
Well, no, we're just asking for a decision. This is, it's been discussed in the past. Your options are to do nothing. Your options are to direct staff to bring back an ordinance for consideration for public hearing, because again, there's lead time involved that Mr. Votto has, and there's a pretty much early mid-March deadline for you getting decals, and being even with the extended decal due date, June 30. Backing that up, she would have to order decals by early to mid-March to be able to have them in place, whether they're regular or annual or a permanent, to have them on sale so that you can get them out the door.
Is there not, I mean, part of the issue that I've heard, and I think Mr. Lewis is speaking to, it's just the process of getting the decal. Is it not something where we can go to a permanent decal where you don't have to come in every year, you don't have to change it out every year? Is it something where, and if we're saying we can't give up the revenue, that just a billing can be sent out to the vehicle owners and they mailed in a check. So there's not the process of actually coming in physically in the building to pick up something.
What happens if they don't pay it though? They already have their decal. So basically, correct? I mean, how would we know whether they paid it or not? Would it be like their dog tags? How would that work?
Again, haven't had any discussion on that. At the last meeting, we talked about a permanent decal and then making up the revenue on that in some other way through the personal property tax, whether there was two ways to do that. You increase the rate and that impacts across the board, as Mr. Weitzel was talking about. It includes items of property that were not having to get a decal before, so it spreads it out. So some people pay more because they got 3 trailers, they got 2 or 3 vehicles that they don't have on the road and they don't want decals. And the other route is to add basically what amounts to would be a $25 fee on everything. And that's where Mr. Weitzel was talking about, add that to the personal property tax. And that's what Mr. Weitzel was talking about at the last meeting, about being very onerous on him to do the abatements.
But I'm not saying add $25 to every personal property tax bill. I'm saying invoice residents who have the automobiles that normally would get a decal. Just invoice those residents for $20 or $25, whatever the difference is. Because I'm still not sold on the fact that it's $535,000 lost revenue. I believe there's expenses in there that can be saved by not doing the process.
Well, the expenses, I mean, if it takes $15,000 for the letter to go out telling people they need to do their decals, it's still going to be the same $15,000 to invoice them. So
half of that's the actual cost of the decal.
Okay, so half of that. So we're going to then say, to your point, we're saving about $8,000. To me, that's a pretty good return on your money. But if someone has a permanent decal, what keeps them from paying it every year? I'm not sure there'd be any reason for them to, and there's no way for law enforcement to say, hey, your decal's expired anymore. So yeah, I mean, I like that approach. I think that approach I would love for that approach to work, but I just don't see how it does work. And again, this gets to be, I think that we're talking about a work session, several work sessions, or, creative thinking or studying the other localities that seem to do this. What did they do and what have they lost? That sort of thing. I don't think we're even close to changing things up. So in my mind, we have no choice but to just do what we normally do, which is order the decals.
We did study, and it has been studied, and I alluded earlier as to what the other jurisdictions did. Or did not allude, I said.
But you've alluded, you haven't given any.
I have. I mean, we did. I can't remember which committee it would have been, but a group, Mr. Suter and I, and
back in 2018, the last time this was considered.
Okay.
And we got data from other jurisdictions, and Spencer reached out, and I know I've said this before. Spencer reached out to his peers, and the lack of data was because that no one could even remember ever having done that process. There was no one at any jurisdiction who had enough institutional memory to remember what happened when they got rid of them. So the default opinion was that they had just foregone that revenue, and that has been the rub of this, is to try to understand how we continue that.
A lot of the other localities too have a pay as you throw plan at their landfill. So the citizen bears the cost And here the county bears the cost when citizens go in. So therefore, it becomes fairly imperative that we know that in order to protect all county taxpayers, that it is a county taxpayer that's getting a free trip across the scales, as opposed to someone from outside the county or at any of our collection sites.
So we need to give the county administrator some direction.
I mean, Mr. Chairman, it seems like there's still a lot of questions, that on both sides of the issue. I realize we have a fast approaching date, but I mean, is it not something that we can discuss again at our next meeting?
I was going to say, could we have a work session on the 22nd at 4:30? And we have to have, can we advertise a potential public hearing for the 22nd and then pull it off if we don't come to any kind of consensus? That
Well, I don't know if we have enough.
No. Okay.
To put in, Ms. Huffman's developed multiple ordinances over time, but we wouldn't, without further discussion, we don't know which one to advertise.
Does everyone want a work session on the 22nd?
To me, it's just too many unanswered questions to make a decision now. I mean, it's not even a question that needs to be answered, but why did we just start talking about this in January if we knew the time crunch? It should have been something we were talking about in September, October.
Okay. So
Well, apparently this has been talked about. I wasn't on the board in 2018, but apparently this has been brought up and the board has repeatedly declined. So if the evidence is there, let's pull it out. If the plan is there, then let's pull it out and show it to us. But so far there hasn't been, and I don't think that this isn't fault of the staff. This is just simply, we can't creatively come up with something that solves the problems we need solved, that is about our county. And we have to have a sticker when people go to the recycling center and when they throw away trash, or we don't know who to ticket. And is a very big problem. It's certainly a very big problem in my district, that citizens call me regularly to talk about our open dumpsters that people from outside our community are throwing trash in. And that's when the sheriff goes and gives tickets, and that's when we can get it under control. If you take away those decals, there is none. And if there is not a way to have a permanent decal and get the revenue repeated, then again, and I want to go on the record, I am absolutely against making up the revenue with our property taxes. This is a way to get taxes from a different group of people, perhaps a group of people that doesn't pay property taxes, that has a car, they're students, they're people that rent. I do not want to load this tax onto our property owners. And certainly at a time right now, we don't know how much we might have to raise it just in the financial situation that we happen to find ourselves because of COVID. We can't do that to them. And I think that there is nothing wrong with going through with not instituting something different for this year. And if the evidence is there, then it can be in line for next year or the year after. And it also, let's put a time frame for dealing with our open dumpsters and those issues. Let's finish those issues before we open up this can of worms. That's what I'm requesting.
okay, thank you, Mr. Suter. If you schedule a work session for the 22nd, please.
Yes, sir. We will.
This time we'll suspend the meeting because it's past 7 o'clock, and we need to start our BRRA meeting, and then we will reconvene this meeting at the end of that meeting, approximately probably 7:45.
Stefan, do I need to pause the recording?